Kylon POV. The sleek outline of the Terran flagship loomed ahead on the view screen. Our sensors failed to detect any damage or deviation from normal function, even at close range. But our hails to the Terran ships, requesting status updates, had gone unanswered for hours now. The radio silence from their fleet was out of character, and I had begun to fear the worst. A shuttle was sent to re-establish contact with the humans and to render aid if necessary. I opted to accompany the team, despite the possible risk to my safety. It was uncommon for a high-ranking officer like myself to partake in a rescue mission, but I felt as if I owed them my presence. I figured if the roles were reversed, Commander Rykov wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. He would be helping in any way he could. What could have caused the Terrans to cease all communications, without any explanation? It wasn't totally unexpected that something had gone wrong with the plan, of course. The logistics of evacuating thousands of civilians in minutes were impractical, if not impossible. I recalled my brief deployment to the Jatari lunar colony, when an inbound asteroid forced a mandatory evacuation. Despite government warnings, many people were reluctant to abandon their homes. Those that did leave in the initial rush funneled into a single spaceport, leading to congestion and delays. It had taken days to clear out all of the inhabitants, and we swept for stragglers down to the last moment. From my experience, the only hope of completing the mission in the time allotted was divine intervention. Yet Commander Rykov seemed so confident, and had brushed off my objections as if they were trivial. How could I press him further, when the humans had delivered time and again on their impossible promises? Had I listened to my instincts, perhaps the current predicament could have been avoided. Now we were sailing into possible danger, without the faintest idea what we might be facing. The pilot, a young female named Dari, cleared her throat. "Sir, our sensors picked up 2 readings consistent with plasma rounds. Closing quickly." My antennae twitched with surprise. Who was even shooting at us? The only ships in our vicinity were the Terrans, but they had never shown an inclination to attack. There had to be another explanation. "Engage evasive maneuvers," I barked. "No time." She pressed a few buttons, likely diverting all power to shields. "Brace for impact." Best case scenario, the shuttle would sustain heavy damage. This small clunker wasn't designed to take direct hits from a railgun. Worst case? Well, we'd all be dead. The next few moments stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and as my anxiety swelled, I struggled to maintain my composure. My instincts screamed at me to do something, even if it were futile. Nothing was worse than waiting, helpless to avert your demise. "Sir, the rounds missed us narrowly," Dari said. "Angle was any lower, they would have clipped the shields." Relief flooded through my veins, followed by confusion. "What? I'm not complaining, but we shouldn't have been a difficult target. Where did the shots come from?" "The Terran flagship," she replied. No, that's impossible." The only vessels in the area were human, but I still couldn't believe that they would fire on us. "They must be hacked by the AI, or maybe they were hijacked. We have to help them immediately." Dari shifted, looking uncomfortable. With respect, I doubt that's the case. There was no distress signal, no signs of a breach, and no change in computer functions. I don't understand." "I don't know why either, sir. But maybe the speaker was right." "Right about what?" "A species that aggressive will attack just for the hell of it. We never should have trusted the humans." My mind was reeling. The evidence indeed pointed to the Terrans acting of their own volition. Dari was correct. I would never ascribe to the speaker's ideas on aggression, given that she had directed them at my own species in the past. But her warnings that the humans would turn on us were prophetic in light of the current situation. Perhaps they were just using me to gain access to the stealth ships all along. Once I had fulfilled that purpose, they had no reason to pretend to be allies any longer. While that explanation made sense given the circumstances, it didn't ring true in my mind. These were people that just yesterday I considered friends, that I would have entrusted with my life. I don't know whether I was just being stubborn, but I still found myself seeking another answer. "How will we respond, sir?" Dari broke the silence. "They fired at us, which is a declaration of war. Under rules of engagement, we are authorized. They don't miss," I stated. She seemed mystified by my comment. "Clearly they did miss, sir. Not by much. There's a first time for everything." "I don't think they ever meant to hit us." I narrowed my eyes. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. Hail the Terran ships again. But, sir, I don't think— Your objection is noted, Dari. Now carry out my orders at once. If the humans didn't answer this time, I wasn't sure what to do. It was obvious that something had changed during the course of their mission. I needed to know what happened before we ended up in a dogfight with the galaxy's premier military power. Commander Rykov appeared on screen. His arms were crossed and his eyes were narrowed to slits. Judging by his expression, if we were meeting in person, he would have tried to punch me in the face. I had no idea what I had done to merit such hostility. I tried to placate the human with a friendly smile. There must be some sort of misunderstanding because I'm pretty sure you just shot at us. His scowl deepened. That was a warning shot. The next one is getting buried in your hull. Orders be damned. Leave now. We just came to help, I protested. We were worried about you. Really? That's why you sabotaged the ships? Rykov scoffed. That's ridiculous. I did no such thing. I guess you thought we wouldn't recover the ships after it shot them down. It's plainly obvious from the computer logs that there was a remote override of their stealth protocol. By someone with level 9 clearance, which is only held by the highest-ranking Federation General. I was stunned by what I was hearing. The humans believed that I, their most ardent supporter, had disabled the Vortex ships. Never would I do such a thing. But if they had evidence to back that conclusion, I wasn't sure how to persuade them. This had to be some sort of setup. Listen, it wasn't me. We can figure this out together, I pleaded. The commander shook his head. Save it. 3 of my men died because of you. We should kill you, but us shooting down a Federation ship is just the thing Ula needs to throw us out. A gasp escaped my lips as realization dawned on me. Ula. She has level 9 clearance too. Wait, she does? That's right. The Speaker is also your Commander-in-Chief, he muttered. She has a lot more motive than you. I couldn't understand why you did it. I know she hates your kind, but I can't believe she would stoop that low. She's a fanatic. I know the type. She believes she's doing what's right, and that makes her dangerous. It was evident the Speaker had meant to pit the fleet and the humans against each other, and, frighteningly enough, it almost worked. Her actions jeopardized the safety not only of the Terrans, but of her own forces and the Devourer civilians as well. Anger simmered inside of me at the thought of confronting her. I wasn't sure what we would do, but holding her accountable was now my highest priority. She's dangerous to all of us as long as she's leading the Federation. Please, unless you still want me to leave, let us help. Ula needs to pay. We'd graciously accept your assistance and welcome you aboard the flagship. Our differences with the humans had been smoothed over, which was a relief. But I couldn't say the ease with which Rykov accused me of betrayal didn't sting, especially after the recent trials we had faced together. Clearly the trust I bestowed in him was not a mutual feeling. We'll dock right away, I replied. But first, you really thought I would sabotage you? Get your people killed? The commander offered a sad smile. If I've learned one thing in my time as a commander, it's that you never really know anyone. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry, General. I never should have accused you. My bitterness dissipated as I saw the glint of wetness in his eyes. A pang of pity stabbed through my heart as I realized the poor man didn't trust a soul. Expecting his confidence after being acquainted for mere days was perhaps too much to ask. Apology accepted. Eula POV. It was easy enough to whip a crowd into a frenzy, as long as you knew what they wanted to hear. The people who turned up to my rally today were a fearful bunch. The battle footage revealed the Terrans for charlatans they were, and their centuries-long deception would not be forgotten by the masses. They had festered within our ranks, scheming, manipulating our politics to unknown ends, propagating their vile culture. A species as warlike as humanity was like a tumour, consuming all that was natural and good, lest it be excised. I had faith that the people could recognize the monster lurking in their midst. My speech today was just giving the citizenry the push they needed. If the commoners directed their anger at the humans, it would force their hand. Terran soldiers striking down civilians on the street would play well in the media, and combined with the news of the Devourer massacre that would be coming in at any moment, the outcry might be enough to oust them from the Federation. When I was a young girl, Humanity was the species noted in our civics class as the greatest diplomats, the peacekeepers. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd. But recently we learned that was all a lie. They are brutal, bloodthirsty. They are not like us, and they do not share our values, the values that hold our federation together. A few cheers rippled through the assembly, but most onlookers looked anxious. That was exactly the sort of sentiment I hoped to evoke. There was no more powerful motivation than fear. I knew I had their rapt attention, and that they would hang on my every word. My friends, rest assured, I share your shock and confusion at the news. But of this I am certain. We must act now. Humans prowl our streets, and it is a matter of time until they give in to their instincts. How many of you have welcomed one into your homes? Sent your children to school with one? Horrified expressions, agitated murmuring. This was the response I had hoped for. Most of the people here had had contact with a Terran at least once. Undoubtedly, some listeners would be hesitant to judge humanity, but a reminder of the mortal danger humans represented should scare some sense into them. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? My voice dropped to a low growl. Say it with me, loud enough for them to hear you all the way back on Earth. Humans are not welcome here. Humans are not welcome here, the crowd shouted. A smile stretched across my face. That's a beautiful sound. Now the Terran embassy is on this very street, mere minutes from here. It defiles our capital with its presence. Why don't you make your voices heard down there? Let's go take back what's ours. Cheers of agreement came in response, and I watched with content as the people turned their sight on the gated complex down the road. It was no accident that I'd selected an outdoor venue for this event, mere minutes on foot from the Terran embassy. There would be no time for the humans to prepare. An angry mob, numbering in the thousands, would overrun their security quickly, and then they would be forced to take more drastic measures. I fished my holopad out of my pocket as the crowd marched off. The next item on my agenda was to make contact with General Keelon and learn what had become of the Terran's rescue mission. Thanks to my meddling, they would have no choice but to resort to violence. The General often sympathized with the humans, likely out of gratitude for them saving his life. If anything could change his mind, it would be the slaughter of an entire planet. He would no longer see humanity as saviors, but as the monsters they truly were. My call to the fleet was either not received or not answered. A small seed of doubt was planted in my mind as I considered the possibility that the Terrans had struck them down in retribution. There was no way they could know what I had done once the ships were lost, of course. But what if they had blamed the fleet anyways? Or just not wanted any witnesses to their massacre? The thought chilled me to the bone. I had to hope that the General was simply occupied with other matters, and would return my call soon enough. Whatever happened to the human ships, I could care less, but the loss of our servicemen would be tragic. Perhaps my actions had been a bit careless. It was too late to turn back now, though. Some people were bound to get hurt dealing with such an aggressive species, but their sacrifice was necessary for the greater good. Today's events were the perfect example of that principle. I doubted the chaos unfolding at the embassy would be bloodless. One of my staffers had tipped off Federation News Central, telling them to keep a camera crew posted at the Terran embassy. The media might have missed the start of the demonstration otherwise. I switched to their live stream on my holopad and was pleased to see coverage of the protest already rolling. 2 human sentries were pacing inside the gates, shouting for everyone to stand back. The crowd jeered at them in response, lobbing rocks and other projectiles over the barriers. A young Xanic reporter gestured at the scene behind him. As you can see, the situation at the Terran embassy is escalating. Speaker Euler gave a short speech this afternoon, laden with anti-human rhetoric. Her supporters felt inspired to take action and, at the speaker's encouragement, travelled out to the complex here. It appears a confrontation is imminent. A few protesters began scaling the walls, and the Terran guards pointed guns at them in response. Undeterred, the climbers dropped down on the other side. I chuckled to myself. The moment the humans opened fire on unarmed civilians, everyone would see them as I did. This incident would be broadcast live across the galaxy, and it would be played on repeat for days, just as the nanite bomb had been. More civilians descended onto the premises. The guards took a few steps back, weapons still raised. Their fingers hovered by the trigger, ready to fire the moment a protester advanced. The crowd closed ranks, then charged together. Rather than the sound of gunfire, all I heard was a human voice shout to fall back. Inexplicably, the guards holstered their weapons and retreated into the building. "Why aren't they shooting?" I screamed. "This isn't right. Humans are supposed to be murderers." My staffers, who were huddled nearby, were caught off guard by my outburst. They were staring at me like I'd lost my mind. A young male named Radi looked particularly concerned. "You want them to shoot? Are you okay?" I glared at him. "Mind your own damn business. I'm perfectly fine." The protesters had broken into the embassy itself while I wasn't paying attention and were no longer visible to the camera. The anchor said something about a hostage situation, but it didn't register in my mind. How could this have happened? An aggressive, militarized species giving up without a fight. This was an absolute disaster. With their diplomats taken captive, the humans would be framed as the victims of the story. I could hear it now, a Terran on the news telling the viewers that they weren't the violent ones. It would distract from the atrocity of their weapons, and instead, the controversy would focus on me inciting the riot. This was the kind of scandal that could cripple the average politician's career. But I was no less a representative. Surely a speaker as popular as myself could weather the storm. Rather than apologizing for my actions, I would double down. With the very soul of the Federation at stake, giving up on my quest to unmask humanity was not an option. Hopefully, my efforts to sabotage their rescue mission had fared better. One incident was all I needed to prove my case, and I knew the humans were bound to slip up eventually. It was in their nature, after all. The atmosphere on board the Terran flagship was much different from my previous visit. The commander left me in a meeting room with 2 armed guards while he spoke with Terran intelligence about Ula's treachery. He claimed it was for my protection, but judging by their demeanor, that wasn't exactly the truth. The duo watched me with suspicious eyes the entire time, never cracking a smile or saying a word. Thankfully, Rykov wasn't gone for long. I couldn't help but notice his face was creased with worry when he returned. Whatever he had just learned, I had a feeling it wasn't good news. "You're back. Did they say what they're going to do about the sabotage?" I asked. The commander sighed. "Earth has bigger problems to deal with, apparently." My antennae twitched in confusion. What could be bigger than treason? They have to do something about the speaker. "They agree that something has to be done, but she's on their radar for other reasons," he replied. "She's been encouraging acts of violence against our civilians. There's been enough incidents the past few days that Earth has closed its spaceports. We can't risk a terror attack on our soil." Terror attack? I figured the phrase must be some Terran military jargon I was unfamiliar with. "What does that mean?" Commander Rykov's eyes widened. "You don't—" Well, it's a form of violence against civilians. Mass casualty events that are planned, done publicly, and meant to frighten a certain group of people. The fact that the Terrans had a term designated for such an attack implied that they occurred with some regularity. I shuddered at the notion of civilians, slaughtered in broad daylight for sole purpose of cruelty. For all the wars the Jatari fought in our early years, the violence was never so senseless. Yet the commander spoke of these terror attacks as though they were just something that happened, like a natural disaster. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Rykov scowled, crossing his arms. "Don't you dare try and act like that stuff never happens in the Federation." I shifted awkwardly. "Well, it doesn't. That's not how I see it. You know our embassy in the Federation capital." He paused, waiting for my nod. Demonstrators stormed it, took the diplomats hostage. Now they're holed up inside, threatening to blow the place to the high heavens if we make a move. "What? Why would they do that? Humans have been nothing but kind to us. There's no reason for bloodshed." Try telling that to them. The way I see it, they're terrorists. But that's still the subject of debate back home. We should be taking the embassy back, not trying to negotiate with these people. They won't even talk to anyone that's human. I could sense that there was something Rykov wasn't telling me. He cared for the people under his command, and for the preservation of life in general, but never to the point where you could hear it in his voice. If this mission was personal to him, I needed to know why. He was a competent commander, but nothing could cloud one's judgment like emotions. I don't mean to pry, but... I placed a hand on his shoulder and noticed the guards tense up at the contact. Do you know someone there? Was it that obvious? Yeah, my brother lives at the embassy. He works for the State Department, Rykov replied. I frowned. Maybe we can help somehow. What are your orders? Well, first they were to return to Earth with the refugees. I asked to join up with the tactical team outside the embassy, but was told, and I quote, "You're too close to this." The bigwigs really expected me to sit this one out. Orders are orders. We'll have to think of a plan after you get home. 2 steps ahead of you, General. I said that you offered to help, and that you asked for me to escort you to the embassy. It would be an insult to the Jatari if I refused. And what do you know? Permission was granted. You lied to your superiors? My brother's life is on the line. I didn't lie, I just stretched the truth. That is the definition of lying. Not the point. Anyhow, the flagship will set off for the capital immediately, and the other ships will bring the refugees back to Earth. I won't force you to go, but I would appreciate your help. Will you join us? There was no question that I should accompany the commander. It went beyond owing him my life or considering him a friend. After the Speaker's betrayal and the Federation's abandonment, the humans needed to see that they still had allies. They needed to know they were not alone. Of course. It's the least I can do, I answered. Rykov smiled. Excellent. Let's head over to the bridge and we'll warp out. The guards were at my side in a heartbeat, pushing me forward like I was some sort of cattle. My patience for the prisoner treatment was growing thin. I was keen on aiding the humans, but not at the expense of my dignity. I did my best to imitate Rykov's arms-crossed pose, glaring at the one on the right. Hands off. I'm taken. The man's burly figure was intimidating, and I had no doubt that he could pound me to a pulp in a scuffle. I knew my rebuke might only lead to rougher treatment down the line, but I met his eyes anyways. I expected an irritated look on his face, but instead I saw the hint of a smirk playing on his lips. You managed to make Max smile, General. Even I can't do that, the commander chuckled. Max snorted. That's because you're not funny. Hey, watch yourself now. Rykov's tone was light and playful, so I doubted his warning was serious. The General is right, though. He is quite capable of walking on his own. Mac nodded, stepping back. His partner followed suit, dropping off a few paces behind us. My thoughts drifted as we passed through the narrow corridors to the bridge. I wished the commander would have dismissed the guards altogether, but I'd settle for having them out of my personal space. If the humans still didn't trust me, that was their problem. You look upset. I'm sorry, it's actually not you, Rykov said. I have round-the-clock security now. An anti-human extremist group put a 1 million credit bounty on my head. My stride faltered as shock seared through my veins. What? Why you? He sighed. Because I'm the one who fired the nanite bomb. We fell into a comfortable silence as we entered the bridge. My mind was still reeling from the latest revelation. If there was a 1 million credit bounty out on me, I wouldn't trust my own crew not to take me out. For the commander to wander about the ship at all, he must possess unwavering faith in his men's loyalty. On my last visit to the flagship, the bridge had been swept up in a chaotic flurry of activity and chatter, at least before Rykov called them to attention. But today, the crewmates were already waiting at their posts, and the course was already plotted into the computer. Seeing the somber expressions around me, I feared the past few days had sapped the human spirit. All right, it looks like we're ready. Course is already input for the capital system. Rykov nodded with satisfaction. Engage warp drive. My stomach lurched as the ship slipped into hyperspace. Even after years of experience with FTL travel, the nausea never went away. Memories of newly enlisted Federation soldiers puking their guts out floated through my mind, and I laughed to myself. The commander glanced up from his holomap, likely confused what there was to be amused about at a time like this. Before he could ask what I found so funny, a stern voice crackled over the emergency frequency. Turn back at once. Unauthorized Terran ships are prohibited from entry to Federation space until further notice. Rykov frowned, pressing a few buttons on his display. Since when? You do realize we're a member of the Federation, so I don't see how we can be denied access to Federation space. Earth halted interplanetary flights earlier today, and the Senate passed a temporary freeze on Terran visitors in response, came the reply. For all we know, you shut down your spaceports because you're planning an attack. That's ridiculous, Rykov protested. Look, we're here on a rescue mission. We're going to dock and you're not going to get in our way. You are trespassing in this system. If you enter real space, you will be fired upon. What's that? You're breaking up. I can't hear you. The commander ended the transmission, shaking his head in disgust. Idiots. Raise shields to full power and enter real space. I felt the ship shudder beneath my feet as it emerged from hyperspace, and my expression morphed into one of horror. No, you must turn back. The planetary defense systems, they'll shoot you down. I'd like to see them try, Rykov growled. Well, this was just wonderful. It seemed Speaker Ula might be getting her wish for a war with the humans after all.